Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. She said it so casually, it almost sounded rehearsed. Physical touch isn't everything. We were sitting at Olive Garden, half-finished wine glasses between us, her phone lighting up every few minutes with notifications from her office Slack. She didn't even look up when she said it, just scrolled, smiling faintly at the screen. I didn't argue. I just nodded, quietly, and let the words sink in. Because that's the moment something shifted. For months, she'd been distant. Late meetings, new projects, a new mentor. An art director named Colin, the kind of guy who wears confidence like cologne. I'd seen him once, outside her office, leaning too close, his hand briefly brushing her arm as they laughed. She told me it was nothing. That's just how creatives are, she said. That night at Olive Garden, I realized she wasn't lying to me anymore. She was dismissing me. When we got home, she lit a candle from Target and opened her laptop again, typing fast, half smiling. I stood in the doorway, watching her fingers dance across the keyboard. The glow from the screen hit her face like stage light. That's when it hit me. She'd turned our life into her set design. I was the background. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, drove to work in my Ford F-150, and didn't turn on the radio. I just listened to the quiet. I build systems for a living, clean, efficient, predictable. But that morning, I realized the system of my marriage had failed its safety check long ago. At lunch, my friend Mark, another engineer, mentioned he'd seen my wife at a gallery opening downtown. She was with that Colin guy, he said. Didn't look like work. I didn't ask for details. I just nodded again. Same reaction. Same silence. When I came home that evening, she was on a call, her voice soft, performative, laughing in a tone that used to be ours. I stood in the hallway, unseen. When she hung up, she turned, startled to find me there. Why are you just standing like that? She asked. Exactly why I stopped trying, I said. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just picked up my jacket, my keys, and my laptop. She thought it was another late shift. I didn't tell her I wasn't coming back that night. By the time she realized, it was already too late. That's when the wall started to form. Not between us, but within her room, between her and the empty space I left behind. She said she wanted distance, not divorce. So I gave her both. The first week after I left felt like a software reboot. Quiet, sterile, necessary. I stayed in a short-term rental outside the city, a one-bedroom near a Home Depot. The walls were thin, the furniture basic, but it was mine. No arguments. No half-truths disguised as explanations. Just silence. She texted me the first night. Are you really doing this? We just needed space. I didn't answer. The next morning, another message. Can we talk? Again, nothing. I wasn't angry. I was calculating. Engineers don't react. They analyze. And I had finally started analyzing her patterns, not her words. At work, I buried myself in blueprints and prototypes. My team noticed I was sharper, quieter. Something in me had clicked into precision mode. During lunch, while others laughed over Chick-fil-A sandwiches, I read about startup funding and AI-driven construction systems. I didn't know it yet, but that research would become the foundation of my next life. A few days later, Mark sent me a link to a social post. It was a photo from my wife's agency event, her and Colin side by side, smiling in that too familiar way. She had captioned it, "Creativity requires trust." I stared at it for a full minute, not because I was hurt, but because it confirmed what I already knew. She wasn't hiding. She was performing. That night, I opened LinkedIn for the first time in months. I updated my profile photo, changed my headline, and drafted a message to a venture contact I'd met at a tech conference a year ago. I didn't hit send yet. Just stared at it, the cursor blinking like a pulse. At 11:47 p.m. Another message from her. You're overreacting. Nothing happened. I set my phone face down on the table and went back to the laptop. That was the moment I understood. She was still trying to control the narrative, even in my silence. But silence has weight. It's not absence, it's strategy. By the weekend, she'd started calling mutual friends, trying to find out where I was. They told her they didn't know, which was true, because I hadn't told anyone. I'd become a ghost with a mortgage and a plan. Every morning after that, I woke before dawn, poured black coffee, and watched the light break through the blinds. My phone stayed quiet. No texts, no calls. The distance she asked for had become a wall, and for the first time, I realized how strong walls can be when you build them for yourself. She thought I was retreating. I was rebuilding. It didn't take long for patterns to reveal themselves. She used to message me every few hours, but now the texts came in bursts, 3 in a row, then silence for days. Each one sounded less like a wife reaching out and more like a publicist trying to control a leak. People are asking where you are. You can't just vanish like this. Let's be adults. I didn't respond to any of them. I wasn't punishing her. I was observing. At work, I started staying late. The quiet hum of machines, the faint smell of metal and oil, it steadied me. Precision was peace. My team assumed I was distracted by personal issues, but in truth, I'd never felt more focused. Every design problem was solvable. Every failure had a blueprint. Even heartbreak. You just had to rebuild the structure from zero. On Thursday, I got an email from a venture group I'd contacted months earlier. They wanted to meet about a prototype I'd been developing, a modular energy system for residential buildings. It wasn't ready, but I was. I scheduled the meeting for Monday. That night, I grabbed takeout from Chick-fil-A and worked until 2 a.m., mapping everything I wanted to build. For the first time, my life had direction without her name on it. Meanwhile, her posts kept coming. A photo of her office, tagged with Colin and a caption about team chemistry. Another from a rooftop event, wine in hand, that same hollow smile. She was broadcasting confidence like a signal, but I knew it was panic disguised as art. Her validation had always lived in reactions, likes, eyes watching her. Mine was in results, quiet and measurable. We were never the same kind of people. I just hadn't admitted it until now. Friday night, I drove past our old house. The blinds were open, lights still on. Through the window, I saw her sitting on the couch, scrolling on her iPhone, face lit by the screen. A wine glass on the table, an untouched plate beside it. It was eerie how familiar it looked, like I'd never existed there at all. I parked for a moment, engine running, and realized something. I didn't want revenge. I didn't even want closure. What I wanted was distance that couldn't be undone, a space she couldn't cross with words, apologies, or memories. When I pulled away, I didn't look back. That house wasn't my home anymore. It was a studio set, and the scene had wrapped. Monday came faster than I expected. I put on a clean shirt, grabbed coffee from Starbucks, and drove downtown for the meeting. The investors were younger than I'd imagined, sharper, more curious than judgmental. I showed them my designs, explained the modular system, the efficiency rates, the future applications. They listened. They didn't ask about my personal life or the ring I'd stopped wearing 2 weeks ago. They asked how soon I could deliver a prototype. When I left the building, I stood by my car for a long time, breathing cold air, realizing I hadn't thought about her once in that room. That night, I finally looked at her messages again. The last one read, "You're acting like a stranger. This isn't you." Maybe she was right. It wasn't me. Not the version she built her comfort on. That version fixed everything. This one just let it fall apart. By midweek, I'd signed the initial agreement. The startup had a name, a plan, and for the first time, momentum. I rented a workspace near a Walmart distribution hub. Cheap, quiet, practical. The kind of place where people worked because they believed in something, not because it looked good on social media. I brought in my tools, set up the first modules, and started coding the control system myself. Every night, around 10 p.m., I'd get another message from her. Shorter now, colder. "You can't just ignore your marriage. I deserve an explanation. This isn't fair." She wasn't wrong about the fairness. I just no longer owed her balance. One evening, I got an unexpected call from Mark. He said he'd seen her again, this time at a client dinner, sitting close to Colin. "Looked cozy," he said carefully. I told him it didn't matter. And it didn't. I'd already learned what silence could do. It starved attention, drained performance, erased the audience she needed to survive. Later that week, I got a LinkedIn notification. She'd viewed my profile. Then Colin. Then one of her agency partners. They must have seen the new company name, the investors. The shift. I didn't post anything personal, no quotes, no subtle messages. Just a clean, professional line. Founder and lead engineer, Modular Future Systems. That was enough. By the weekend, the phone stopped buzzing. The silence had changed. It wasn't mine anymore. It was hers. The first time I saw her again was by accident. 2 months had passed. I was leaving a meeting downtown, walking past a glass-walled cafe, when I caught her reflection before I saw her face. She was sitting with Colin. Not close, not touching, but the kind of not touching that says everything. Her hand rested on her coffee cup, frozen midair as she listened to him talk. She looked smaller. The same clothes, the same perfect posture, but the energy was gone. When she saw me through the glass, her eyes widened. I didn't stop walking. I just nodded once, kept moving. No drama. No pause. The silence between us hit harder than any confrontation could. That evening, I drove to my workspace and stayed there until sunrise. The prototype was coming together. Smooth lines, seamless circuits, quiet precision. The kind of thing that worked even if no one noticed it. Maybe that's what I'd always been to her. Reliable. Invisible. But now, every time I tightened a bolt or coded a new function, I felt distance harden into strength. A week later, Colin's name came up again, but not from her. One of the investors mentioned him casually over lunch. Didn't he work at that ad agency that just lost a major client? I nodded, pretending not to know the details. But inside, something clicked. The contract she'd fought so hard for, the one she'd used to climb, was slipping through their fingers. I didn't do anything to cause it. I didn't have to. Reputation collapses quietly when built on manipulation. That night, she called. Not texted, called. I let it ring until voicemail. Then listened. Her voice sounded different, slower, stripped of its performance. I don't know what happened to us, she said. You used to care. I played it twice. Not because I missed her, but because I wanted to understand the tone. There was confusion, not guilt. She still couldn't see that I hadn't vanished. I'd evolved. By now, my startup had real traction. The investors were doubling down. The press was circling. I'd been invited to speak at a tech conference in Austin. My name was suddenly in rooms she could never access. The next morning, I saw a new notification. She'd followed the company page on LinkedIn. No words. No apology. Just digital curiosity from someone watching her reflection fade in glass. That's when I realized she didn't lose me. She lost access. A few weeks later, I heard through a mutual contact that her agency had downsized. The project she'd been leading was pulled. Colin had taken a creative sabbatical, which in that world meant quietly being pushed out. She, meanwhile, had been reassigned to smaller clients, low-profile campaigns that didn't make headlines. The kind of work she used to hand off to interns. I didn't feel satisfaction, just symmetry. Around that time, I moved my workspace into a larger office. The company was growing faster than expected. We hired 3 engineers, rented a small suite near a Walmart distribution hub, and signed our first manufacturing contract. The days blurred into numbers, meetings, and code. I didn't think about her until one afternoon when an email popped up, her name in the subject line. She'd found my work address. The message was polite, professional even. I saw the press release. Congratulations on the launch. You always had this in you. No emotion, no request. But there was something between the lines. A reach for connection that wasn't there anymore. I replied the same day with one sentence. Thank you. Nothing more. That weekend, Mark invited me to dinner. He'd run into her recently. She doesn't look great, he said carefully. Colin's gone. People are talking. I asked what they were saying, but he shook his head. Just that she seems lost. Like she doesn't know what story she's in anymore. I didn't respond. It wasn't my story to fix. When I got home, I checked LinkedIn again. She'd posted a long reflection about reinvention and self-growth. The kind of post that sounds brave but reads like damage control. A photo of her at a coffee shop, MacBook open, pretending to work. I scrolled past without stopping. The next morning, I woke up to a message from one of our new investors. Saw your ex's post, he wrote. Funny timing. Her old agency just lost another big account. I didn't reply. The universe had already handled what I never needed to. That night, as I locked up the office, I caught my reflection in the glass door. Calm, steady, unbothered. I realized I'd stopped checking my phone hours ago. The silence no longer felt like space. It felt like home. She once said physical touch wasn't everything. Maybe she was right. But distance, when you own it, becomes something stronger. It becomes freedom. It was late October when she reached out again. This time, it wasn't through email or social media. She called my office line directly. My assistant picked up, then transferred it to me without realizing who it was. I heard her voice before she said my name. Hesitant, quieter than I remembered. She said she just wanted to talk, just 5 minutes. I could have hung up. Instead, I let her speak. She started with small talk, pretending to be casual. Asked about the company, said she'd read an article about our expansion. Then her tone shifted. She said she missed the calm we had, the safety. Said things had gotten messy after I left. She didn't mention Colin, but the silence after his name told me enough. I listened, said nothing. Every pause on my end seemed to make her fill the air faster. It was strange, hearing her rush to explain herself when I wasn't asking for anything. After a while, she said something that stayed with me. You just disappeared like I never existed. I almost smiled, because that was exactly what she'd done long before I left. I ended the call with one sentence. You'll be fine. Then I hung up. That night, I didn't feel anger or nostalgia, just a heavy calm. I drove to a late-night diner near my building, grabbed a coffee, and sat by the window watching trucks roll past the parking lot. A Ford F-150 pulled in next to mine, headlights cutting through the mist. It made me think about the last time she'd seen my truck in our driveway. It wasn't just a vehicle to her anymore. It was proof of departure. A few days later, one of her colleagues, someone I barely knew, sent me a message on LinkedIn. She's not doing great, it said. She lost some clients. She talks about you sometimes. I didn't reply, not because I didn't care, but because she needed to feel what silence really meant, the kind that isn't punishment, just absence. Work kept growing. We landed another contract, this time with a company her agency once pitched to and lost. I didn't seek it, it found me. When the deal was finalized, I thought of her again, not with bitterness, but with clarity. She had built her life on performance. I'd built mine on precision. One collapses when the spotlight fades. The other thrives in the dark. That's when I finally understood. I hadn't gone silent to hurt her. I'd gone silent to hear myself again. Winter came fast that year. The city felt different, quieter, sharper, like everything unnecessary had frozen and fallen away. My company had doubled in size. Investors started calling me by my first name like we'd been friends for years. I still worked long nights, but they didn't feel lonely anymore. Purpose has a way of filling silence. One Friday, I got an envelope at the office, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a short note. I drove past the old house today. Your truck's not there. Feels strange. No signature, but I knew the handwriting. The same looping S. I'd once watched her trace on napkins during dinners. She was reaching again, but this time there was no ask. Just nostalgia trying to find oxygen. I didn't respond. Some ghosts need to stay unacknowledged. The following week, I was invited to speak at a tech summit in Denver. It was my first time on stage since college. I talked about systems, innovation, failure, everything except my personal life. After the talk, people lined up to shake my hand. Among them was a reporter from a business magazine. She asked if she could profile me and my company for their next issue. 2 months later, my face was on the cover under the headline, "The Engineer Who Built His Own Way Out." That issue ended up everywhere: LinkedIn, Facebook, even Instagram. I didn't post it, but she saw it. I knew because she viewed my profile 3 times in one day. The same night, she finally sent another message. "You look different. Stronger." Then, after a pause, "I miss what we had." I stared at those words for a long time. Not because they stirred anything in me, but because they sounded like a confession made too late. She wasn't missing me. She was missing the control she'd once had, the comfort of someone who cared enough to stay when she stopped trying. That weekend, I went for a long drive. The snow was heavy, the roads quiet. I passed the old Olive Garden where it had all started, the place where she'd said physical touch wasn't everything. The lights were still warm, the same cheap wine in the window. I parked across the street and watched people laugh through the glass. For the first time, it didn't hurt to remember. It just ended. Some endings aren't explosions. They're quiet dissolves, invisible but final. A few months later, I got another message from her. This time it wasn't from curiosity or pride. It was desperation disguised as conversation. She said she'd been laid off. The agency had folded after losing its biggest accounts, and most of her team was gone. She wrote that she needed a break from everything, that she was thinking about moving somewhere quieter. I read it once, closed my phone, and went back to reviewing contracts. There wasn't cruelty in my silence, just clarity. That same week, our company closed its first major round of funding. The news spread fast: tech blogs, local papers, even a feature on a morning show. People I hadn't heard from in years started reaching out. She must have seen it too, because a day later, she called again. I didn't answer. The voicemail was short. "I'm proud of you," she said. Then after a long pause, "I didn't think you'd ever stop chasing me." That line stayed with me longer than I wanted it to. Not because it hurt, but because it was true. For years, I had been chasing validation from someone who mistook attention for love. When I stopped, she lost the reflection she built herself around. 2 weeks later, I ran into one of her old coworkers at a networking event. He told me she'd tried to freelance, but clients didn't stay. "She's talented," he said, "but something about her feels unfocused now." I didn't respond, but I understood exactly what he meant. When your life depends on being seen, invisibility feels like death. That night, back at the office, I looked around the workspace. The hum of servers, the glow of monitors, the quiet focus of people who believed in what we were building. Every sound felt alive. I realized I hadn't thought of her in days. Not because I was trying to forget, but because there was nothing left to remember that still belonged to me. Before leaving, I checked my phone one last time. Her message from earlier sat there unopened. I deleted it without reading. The final act of distance wasn't ignoring her. It was no longer needing to know what she said. She once wanted distance, not divorce. Now she sleeps next to both. And somewhere, between the silence and the collapse, I found the peace she thought didn't exist. It's been over a year now. My life doesn't look anything like it used to. The company has grown beyond anything I imagined. We moved into a new building. Glass, steel, silence. Investors visit, reporters call, and people I've never met quote things I said on panels. But success doesn't feel like victory. It feels like calm. The kind of calm you get when you finally stop explaining yourself. Every so often, I still get an email from her. Nothing dramatic, just small check-ins, holiday greetings, congratulations she doesn't really mean. I never reply. She doesn't expect me to. I think she just wants proof that the line is still open, that the distance between us still hums with possibility. But it doesn't. It's static now, quiet, final. Last month, I heard she'd moved back to her hometown. A friend said she's doing some freelance design work, living with her sister. No new agency, no spotlight. Just quiet. I didn't feel pity. I felt distance. Earned, necessary distance. She had once told me that physical touch wasn't everything. Back then, she said it to justify how far she'd already drifted. Now it's her truth, not mine. One evening, I left the office late. The parking lot was empty except for my car, frost glinting on the hood. I sat there a while, engine off, phone silent. I thought about how it all started. Olive Garden, her laughter, the way she said I was just comfortable. That moment used to burn in my chest. Now it feels like something that happened to someone else. Maybe it did. I've learned that not every ending needs closure. Some people will never understand the weight of what they lost because they never saw its value when they had it. She wanted distance, not divorce. But distance grows on its own when you stop chasing connection that doesn't reach back. I drove home that night through the quiet streets, passing the same glowing Starbucks where she used to sit and scroll through her phone. The same city, the same lights, but I wasn't the same man. When I parked outside my apartment, I caught my reflection in the window. Calm, steady, untouchable. She said physical touch isn't everything. I said exactly. That's why I stopped trying. Now she sleeps next to a wall, not a man. And I don't disappear anymore. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.